All right, guys, today we're going to be talking about Stellantis, everybody's favorite faux American car manufacturer. They're the fake member of the big three. The big three, Ford, GM, Dodge, Chrysler sometimes, Daimler, whatever they call it, Fiat, FCA, Stellantis, whatever you want to put in there as the other third member of the big three, I don't know how you say Daimler, Daimler, I don't know how to say that word. It doesn't matter anymore. They're gone. They're not part of this conversation anymore. But I don't think they're part of the big three anymore. So the big three, as you may know, is Ford, Chevy, and Chrysler. They are the largest auto manufacturers in the U.S. They make up a large portion of all U.S. sales, a huge share of the automotive industry in the U.S. and globally. They are kind of the three powerhouses of auto manufacturing across the world. And, they're based in the U.S. So forever, they've been highly revered as the staple, the backbone of the auto industry. In 2008, they were so important that they were bailed out by the taxpayers because they were deemed too big to fail. And now we're all paying for that. But I'm going to focus on Stellantis. Now, Stellantis, if you guys don't know, it was coined in 2021, and it was basically the culmination of, some foreign company and FCA, Fiat Chrysler Auto Group, joining forces and creating a conglomerate of garbage. But they've been having a tough go at it lately. It seems like as soon as Lee Iacocca died, the company died with him. I don't know where it went. It was just like, gone. But a lot of people will make the claim they are still part of the big three. They're still a big staple of American manufacturing. And I'm going to kind of prove you wrong here. So their warehouse, their main facility is up in Michigan in the Dearborn area, whatever they call the Dearborn facility. And it's actually probably going to be for sale soon. So they got their big Chrysler building, and it's not looking good for it. It's kind of falling apart, and they've laid off almost everybody in the facility there. And then they have two factories that are also not looking good. And the layoffs are starting to pile up because the vehicles that they are making are starting to pile up. They're starting to sit on dealers' lots. People don't really want them. Even when I asked AI, it said Stellantis vehicles, including Jeep, Rams, and Dodges, are among the worst selling in the automotive industry with massive inventory backups. And then it said something super derogatory about people don't want them because the quality is so low. I'm sorry if you work at one of these. I'm sorry, but you got to understand the quality's low. So they're starting to pile up. They can try to do whatever they can to make it seem all good. I know they've had, big profits this year, but they've also had some pretty big hits. So Q1 of 2024, Stellantis global shipments fell 10% and revenue dropped 12% to the previous year. U.S. sales were down 14% and U.S. market share fell to its lowest in a long time. That's not ideal if your CEO, Carlos Tavares, he's probably not thrilled about that. So what they had to do was they brought in a few executives from overseas, a few European executives, some French guys, and they said, hey, we need help. And they came into the U.S. I don't know if they're here yet, but that's their plan, to bring some European executives to the U.S. because, French cars are so high quality that will save these couple facilities that are making cars that basically all need to be recalled. that's going to save them, French cars and their quality. So they said they needed to bring in some of their professional executives to come into the U.S. facilities and clean them up. I can't imagine the ego hit that must feel to anybody that's working at some of these facilities, and some of the executives that are there currently hearing they're bringing in people to clean up the mess that they made. Like these, I don't think that these people are unqualified. I think that they are given a bag of tricks that has no tricks in it, if you get what I mean. Like these local people in the U.S. could make these companies good, but they are trying to do it with like one hand tied behind their back, and then the company sells to another company every 5 years and restructures. So how do you manage that? And they've taken some big hits. Lately they invested $1.2 billion into $1.6 billion investment into Leap Motors of China, which is a electric vehicle startup. The Stellantis, they saw the writing on the wall. They were like, we need a EV partner that can help us on some batteries and some electric and whatever electric vehicle tech. So they bought 51% of this company in 2023, October. Then in August of 2024, there was a 100% electric vehicle import tariff put on from China to China. So the U.S. implements 100% tax on any vehicle that's electric that comes in from China. So $10,000 vehicle becomes $20,000. $50,000 vehicle becomes a $100,000 vehicle. Pretty rough. That's gonna hurt sales. Okay, they could just buy parts. There's a 25 to 50% tariff on just the batteries and the electronics. So they bought this company, and basically they'll have to pay double for almost anything that comes into the U.S. So that kind of went bust on them. That probably stung a little bit, and it's unfortunate. Obviously, I'm wholeheartedly against tariffs. I think that's a whole nother discussion, but obviously I think that's completely against any free market enterprise and kills competition and all kinds of good stuff. But I feel bad for Stellantis. That's a hit that they couldn't really prepare for. You never know when your government's just gonna bend you over a barrel. And then on top of that, they've had recalls, 1.2 million recalls for the camera systems on all of their vehicles. They've had issues with their Grand Wagoneers not selling because they're higher priced than a lot of their other vehicles, and the quality just isn't there. They've had engine issues. They've had tons of stuff with the Grand Wagoneer that was supposed to be kind of their staple item. It's like hardly even a Jeep. It's like its own thing. They're kind of trying to seem like they were trying to do like what with the Ram did, where they spun it off into its own world. Like if you call a Ram a Dodge, somehow people get angry. It's not a Dodge, it's a Ram. Like that's a different thing all of a sudden. For the last 10, 20 years, it was a Dodge Ram. Now don't you call that a Dodge. It's a Ram product built by Stellantis. Like, I don't know where people got this pride from in it, but like, be careful. And then obviously there's this whole rubber duck situation in the Jeep community that's probably killing sales, I would hope. I would imagine. I have some here. I've been trying to buy as many as possible so that less Jeep owners buy them. But it's just, it's kind of a cascade of hit after hit. They are in a good situation. They have a big conglomerate. They have a ton of car manufacturers under them. They're not carrying a lot of debt, but they are carrying a lot of inventory, which obviously isn't good. Their car list isn't awesome, but they have a long list of cars. I mean, they own, let's go through the list here, Abarth, Alfa Romeo, Chrysler, Citroen, Dodge, DS, I don't know what that is, Fiat, Jeep, Lancia, Maserati, Opel, Peugeot, whatever that is. I know what it is, I just don't know how to say it. Ram and Vauxhall. So they have a very strong European and U.S. car base. I don't know, some of you Australian guys maybe, or something, somewhere else that buys a lot of cars. Maybe they have a big Australian audience. I don't know, but they have a pretty good base of, cars that they could sell and make better and switch up. But they just have such an identity crisis. Like, even so, to give you some history here, Chrysler in 1928 became Chrysler. Then in 1998, they became Daimler Chrysler. Then in 2009, they became Fiat. Then in 2014, they became FCA. Then in 2021, they became Stellantis. They just keep on this path of just, like, who are they? Where do you, like, if I have a 2009, it's a different car than a 2021. It's not even the same conglomerate anymore. It's like, it doesn't even make sense, honestly. It's such a crazy situation to see them just like trade hands. And, I was thinking about it. Do I think they'll fail? Probably not. They seem like they're unfailable. They just keep trudging through, and somebody else is going to buy them. Somebody else is going to take them over. Somebody else is going to bring them in. Right now, I wouldn't call them an American company. Their headquarters is in the Netherlands. They sell 50% of their products to Europe. They're more of a European car company than an American car company. That's why I think they have lost their title of the big three, because, if it goes by just the amount of market share that they have, how much of the U.S. market share they have, they're like, I don't know, fourth on the list or something, fifth, something down there. They're below Toyota, so it's, Chevy, it's GM, Ford, and then Toyota, and then Stellantis somewhere in there. So Toyota would arguably fit better in the big three. They're the same situation. They're not an American company, not an American CEO, headquarters in a foreign country, and they have a bigger market share than Stellantis. So there's really no argument that they're the big three anymore. And this may not matter to anybody at all, but obviously it's been a deeply embedded thing into American society of like, you support the big three, like my grandpa would tell me that growing up, like you're either a Ford guy, a Chrysler guy, or a Chevy guy, a GM, whatever, So it's kind of like embedded into our brains, I think, maybe mine a little bit. So I don't think they'll fail. If anything, they'll just trade hands again. Maybe they'll fall under one of the other manufacturers. I don't see, Chevy or Ford wanting to buy them. They're kind of like tainted a little bit in a way. They have such an identity crisis that I don't even know. Like, when you think of these brands, what do you think of? Do you think Chrysler product? Do you think Stellantis? Do you think Fiat? What do you think when I say Dodge? Who do you think the owner of Dodge is? Like, what do you think the parent company is? Where do we go from there? So it makes it kind of a tough situation. And then, their EV stuff has been a real tough go. Like, Ford and Chevy kind of have like an EV presence. Not that that really matters going into 2024, 2025. I think that, the EV craze hasn't died, but I think the EV craze has died on, other cars. Like, nobody's busting down the door of Chrysler telling them, hey, I want to buy an EV from you. I think it's more like, it's just going to kind of be like a normal car. Like, you'll buy your Tesla, you'll buy your, Cadillac's got some nice EVs out right now. But I don't think this like push to be in the market is going to be there quite as much. I think that's something that's going to dwindle down a little bit, and maybe they'll finally focus more on hybrid stuff, but it'd be great if they could just focus on what the consumer wants. But I don't think we'll ever be at a world like that where a company makes what the consumer wants. It's more a company makes what the consumer can get regulated by government entity. So kind of where that falls. And then I did find this fun quote from Lee Iacocca. If you don't know, he basically built Chrysler name to be as strong as it was. Without him, it probably would have failed years and years and years ago. If a manufacturer doesn't have enough confidence in the quality of the product he makes, he doesn't have the right to ask you to buy it. And that is something that is completely lost on a ton of these manufacturers. I mean, there's so many that have just quality that is so dismal. And, Tesla does not dodge that in the least. I mean, they have their fitment gap and everything, their panel gap and all kinds of crazy stuff. I think it's a little more present because they have so few models where, when you look at a company like, Stellantis, they have, I don't know, hundreds of models of vehicles. So it's hard to really kind of focus in on quality when you have so many different things going on, if you know what I mean. Like even when you look at Jeep has 18 different models of car. And then you look at something like Dodge. Dodge has a ton of different models of car, ton of different engine options, ton of different options on things. So it's so hard to really hone in on the small numbers of things. So I think they kind of hide the quality in quantity in a way. And I think that a lot of manufacturers can get away with that. I think, Ford and Chevy both get away with that in a way. But I think Stellantis kind of gets away with it the most. You look at something like the Jeep Compass, and then you're like, oh, wait, that's just a Fiat 500 with a body kit. And, that happens across the board. But I think, some Opels and some Fiats kind of slip through a little better into there. And I think that's something that we're going to see a lot more going forward with a brand like, Stellantis, who just won't make as many vehicles. Even their whole development team, they are working on laying them off and moving them overseas to be cheaper labor. So, Americans, we have all these labor laws. It costs a lot of money to hire Americans. So they've decided to cut jobs, send them overseas. And we're talking executive level. And I think they call them C-suite level, where they're, anybody who's designing the car or working on the finance department of it or anything like that, some of the executive level stuff is getting sent overseas. And I think that's going to really start to show here soon if they'll be as in touch with the American market or if it really doesn't even matter anymore, because I think we're also in a point where the market doesn't dictate the cars, the manufacturers dictate the market, because, things like 100% tariff on Chinese cars, that will limit competition, which will feed the big three, which will make it easier for them to grow. Things like Toyota and stuff like that. Obviously, they come from Japan, so they're dodge this tariff, even though Toyota builds, cars in all over the U.S. and even, Acura, Honda, they all have manufacturing in the U.S. They're just as American as any other car. I mean, even you look at my Camaro, 4th gen Camaro, they're making those in Canada. My truck, a ton of the parts from it came from Mexico. It's kind of just dispersed a little bit. Maybe I'm the only one that gets a little nostalgic about American companies. As I sit here and also tell you, I don't want, tariffs on foreign companies. I just want our American companies to have to compete with them, on a fair playing field. If they can't compete, that's on them. If they can't make a product good enough that makes me want to buy it, that's on them. That's kind of the same that Lee was saying, good old Iacocca. Yeah, their Auburn Hills Tower is their kind of staple. When you think of the Chrysler building, not the one in New York City, you think of the Chrysler building, you see this big tower. Iacocca even said it was built by the minivan profits, and it's this shining beacon, but they are clearing it out and they're going to attempt to sell this building that I do not see them selling. I don't understand who's going to buy a building that has a Chrysler logo built into it, but The Auburn Hills Tower, we'll see what happens with that. I would almost bet any amount of money. I would bet a good amount of money that it's going to be put up for sale here soon as these layoffs start to unravel. And, if you look at my video a few weeks back, I went through some of the numbers of cars that are sitting unsold, and Chrysler is huge on that. Stellantis is huge on that. They have more inventory sitting on lots than anyone. New stuff, even old stuff. I mean, there's some, 2021, 2022, Rams sitting on lots right now unsold. So it's just like kind of a few different things pressing in on them. Obviously, they're probably got a way out. They're obviously much smarter than a guy sitting in a podcast studio talking about them, but I think they're going to end up in a weird situation, either selling vehicles extremely cheap, which is already happening, phasing out more models, closing facilities, selling off assets, things like that, all while they're replacing the Hemi that was like such a cornerstone flagship in like the performance world. It wasn't a great engine in my eyes. I mean, I'm not like a Hemi guy, but it was such a cornerstone to the US performance market, and they're changing them over to this Hurricane engine that I don't know what it's going to do in the next few years. I mean, only time will tell on that deal, but I just can't imagine it has that same gut visceral reaction of flooring it in a 700 horsepower supercharged Hellcat versus this Hurricane that's an inline six, turbo engine. And I got no problem with that, obviously. But when you're talking about putting it in a 4,500 pound car with current emission standards and, some small turbos and all kinds of other stupid BS that'll come along with it, it's probably not going to be as fun. I mean, you're seeing it now. They're pushing it pretty hard. They're trying to get some influencers on board with it. They're giving them out. They're like, hey, bring this to Zip Tie Dregs, build a car, yada, yada, yada. I think that will get 0 to none interest around the engine. From a consumer standpoint, it may be interesting to watch. And I think if anything, it may turn around and backfire as like, oh, look at what all these guys did with it, and it was a dud. So I think it's a dangerous game to play, but they're trying it, and we'll see how that works. It's definitely not going to be as cool as giving guys supercharged Hellcat engines. That's for sure. But as far as the big three go, I really think there's one car company that's been growing very rapidly in the last couple of years that's quickly gaining market share, that's quickly gaining attention, popularity. We touched on them briefly, but I think going forward, when people say big three, I'm going to have to say it's no longer Stellantis, and I think Tesla deserves the location. Whether you like EVs or not, I think Tesla has earned that location as the big three. They make vehicles in the US, they employ American labor, they have a huge market share, they have a cult-like following, and they are actually building cars to the best of their ability, which I think is also an important part of it. Cars can suck, yes, but as long as they're trying to build them to the best of their ability, I do have a lot more respect on that. Whereas other companies don't seem to be trying to build them to the best of their ability. So that definitely adds a level of interest to it. Maybe Tesla will buy them. I doubt it. I don't think they want anything to do with that. I think this is like the hot potato that's just going to keep bouncing around until somebody finally throws it on the ground. It's just kind of going to be one of those things where maybe they'll sell it for parts. I don't know. Maybe Mercedes will buy them. They've already had a merger at one point. Maybe Mercedes will buy them. I don't see them failing though, but because Dodge is kind of that. I was thinking about this quote last night. Dodge is kind of that brand that can crawl through 500 feet of shit and come out smelling clean on the other side. If you know where that quote's from, it's like they somehow always manage to get through it. Granted, the 2008 situation was a lot of taxpayer dollars. Help them get through it. You guys can be the judge whether we should have or shouldn't have, pushed them along through there. But, I mean, here they are, There's so much more information here, guys. I mean, there's layoffs, there's things coming down the pipeline, there's all kinds of different stuff. Obviously, I'm extremely biased, as I could care absolutely no less about any of these brands. Not a single one of these Dodge, Fiat, Chrysler, Stellantis products have interested me in the last 10 years at even the slightest. The Viper is kind of cool, and that's about it. Done. End of story. It's like I'm looking at the list of cars, and it's just like, man, nothing of interest at all. So maybe somebody can turn them around. Maybe somebody can step in and finally teach them how to build a truck transmission that doesn't explode and is actually of somewhat quality. But yeah, they're in an interesting spot. So if you work for them, I'm sorry to be so negative. I know I've talked to a couple people on Facebook DMs that work for them, and I've dug deep into the Reddit page of Stellantis where some people that work there are talking about it as well. So I don't like to see layoffs, but when a company doesn't do right by its customers and doesn't build the products that the customers desire, that's what's going to happen. And I understand they are building these products like this on purpose a lot of the time. A lot of the problem comes from people in suits, kind of, north of Richmond a little bit, like this Washington, D.C. There's like a little almost square spot in the country where all of the shit comes from, and that's where a lot of these problems come from. So I understand. I hope it can get better. Maybe somebody will step in. Maybe there's somebody within that company that can rise and be the new Lee Iacocca and save the company. But I think the ship has sailed, and I think they're gonna be building shit until they kind of fizzle out. But don't listen to me. I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm just a guy that does some research. I like doing these kind of videos, though, guys, because I love going into deep rabbit holes of information. And, I do this anyways, so I'm going to just do this. And whatever I learn, I'm going to talk to you guys about it. So that's it. That's the fun of it. Let me know in the comments if there's anything good or anything I missed or anything else going on. But that's going to do it, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Keep it saucy. I'll see you next time.